Hello, and welcome to Scare You to Sleep. I'm your host, Shelby Scott. This week we're sponsored by Vistaprint and Helix Mattresses. October is coming up, and boy do I have some fun stuff planned. I can't wait. For our last episode of the pre-Halloween season, I'm going to end us off a little lighter. First up this week, we have an amazing story by Anna Marks. Anna has a great podcast you should check out after this episode called 3 Mad Girls. Now, on to the story. Here is The Smile of Death. The lights were bright at the club that night. Backs of balding heads clashed with the fleshy faces of drunken frat boys, while catcalls and whistles almost drowned out the music. Dancing girls curved their bodies and twisted their arms above their heads, undulating their hips to the loud bass. A young man on stage, who was celebrating his 18th birthday with a lap dance, was shouting to the cheering crowd that he was having the time of his life. To the right of the birthday boy, a young woman threw open a door marked dressing room and wove her way, disinterested, through the tables and up to the bar in the front of the room. To her, it was just another night. "I'll see you Monday, Kiwi," she shouted over the music, smacking her hand down on the countertop to get the attention of the bartender. The young woman on the other side of the bar swept waist-length black hair over her shoulder and shouted back, "You got it, babe. Nice work tonight." Elena smiled, then turned and began making her way towards the exit sign, avoiding eye contact with anyone along the way. The night air sped through the heavy door she pushed open and dragged a chill up on her spine. Nonetheless, she fearlessly crossed the threshold without a glance back into the room, habitually putting her hand into her purse as she did so to check that her tips were still there. She stopped just outside the door to put on her jean jacket, raising her hand in greetings to the bouncer sitting there. "Night, Bruiser." "You stay safe, honey," he responded. Her heels made a loud clacking sound on the cement as she walked away along the deserted sidewalk. Empty beer bottles and trash littered the path. Elena sidestepped a greasy puddle and hopped onto the street. She sang an Untitled song in her head to the beat of her black pleather boots as she walked, but she only knew the chorus. After a while, she got bored of repeating the same lines over and over, and she looked upwards to get her mind off the steady rhythm of her walk. She could see the moon, weaving in and out of the buildings whose broken windows and collapsed facades were hidden by the dark shadow of the night. Were her own flaws hidden by the darkness? She always wondered as she put herself on display in front of the bright lights if everyone could see what she tried to hide behind her confident smile. She drew her coat around her as the wind blew an unfriendly gust in her face. Her eyes began to tear, but up ahead she could make out the blurred silhouettes of 3 figures. Their obnoxious laughter soon filled the night air, and she wasn't alone on the street anymore. The men turned as soon as they heard her heels, still drumming to the beat of the unknown song. Another gust of wind blew and tangled her long gold earrings with her hair. "Hey, baby, what are you doing out here in the cold? Why don't you come back to my place and I'll get you all warmed up?" one called out, displaying a mouthful of crooked teeth. "Fuck off," Elena said. The sound of her heels were steady on the cement. "Aw, baby, don't get like that. I said fuck off." She had dealt with these kinds of pricks before. Almost every night, she'd get offers from random assholes to spend the night in their beds. She carried pepper spray in her purse, but she'd only had to use it once. Mostly the guys would stay put at whatever stupid hangout they had picked for the night. As she passed them, she felt that she was a little girl again, cowering inside of her bedroom closet late at night, trembling with a nauseating anticipation. She kept her head up high and her jaw set, however focusing on her clacking heels to keep her in the moment. She found that if she stayed tough and blunt, they were quicker to leave her alone. She didn't like it, but she didn't have much of a choice. This was her path to walk, alone, in the dark. She left the guys behind her, ignoring their whistles and obscene hand gestures, her heart rate slowing as the distance between them grew. She looked down at her watch. 3:18. Shit, she mumbled. She didn't want to miss the subway. Elena pulled her jacket in tighter around her body as she descended the dirty stairs in the subway station. It was always disgusting down here. Water dripped from the ceiling and gum was stuck to the walls. Once in a while, a rat would run across the tracks, but the people were oftentimes the most revolting. Seedy old men with missing teeth and shady characters with hooded heads held down were frequent visitors here. Sometimes you'd get a young drunken couple or some college kids trying to get home after a hard night of partying. Tonight hadn't been slow at the club, but down here it was almost dead. An older woman in layers of clothing was sitting in one of the metal chairs, her chin resting on her chest. She was the only other person waiting. Growing bored, Elena looked around. The dim lighting of the tunnel made the place look even dingier and gloomier, she thought. Well, what did she expect? Rosy wallpaper and a disco ball? Elena scoffed at the memory of herself, at 17 when she was just starting out, in the city, making her own decisions, her own money, taking risks, or so she thought. On her own, getting to the places she needed to go and no one to stop her. No one to hurt her when she got home at night. Taking the subway used to be so exciting at night. It was against the rules. It was dangerous. She used to tell men that she lived for danger. They'd be impressed when she would dance and tell them she liked fast cars because she had something in common with them. Now, at the age of 26, she knew that these are the sights and sounds of a dirty old city, and this was just another night. A recorded voice broke the eerie silence of the tunnel to warn the subway goers that the train was coming. Impulsively, uncharacteristically, Elena stepped away from the edge. The train screeched to a halt, and the doors opened with a quiet squeal. Elena's earring was still tangled in her hair as she stepped onto the train. The lights were an orange-yellow, and they flooded the interior of the old, run-down car with an omniscient glow. Shadows hid under the shabby seats, but didn't dare snake up Elena's legs to hide her imperfections, to hide her scars. In the light, her heavy makeup cast dark circles under her eyes and made her skin glow pastily. Sequins from her slinky top were littering the front of her frayed jean jacket, and her scuffed pleather boots were deafening on the floor. She was uncomfortable under these lights. She preferred the single white light that offered her faceless silhouettes in the darkened room of the club. The door closed. Taking a seat, Elena noticed as the train moved away that the woman in layers was still sitting, immobile, on the metal bench. For a fleeting moment, while she looked out of the window, Elena wondered if the woman was dead. Then again, she'd often wondered if she herself could still be considered living. Surely the demise had started from deep within, which had consumed first her innocence and then her vigor. was going to take a hold of her soon. Taking a deep breath, she pondered the journey she was making towards her grave, living inside her empty, decaying body, and falling from youth until the final moment when her last breath would be exhaled. Elena exhaled. The train stopped. The doors squealed open, and now there were 2 people within the car. Elena wondered why a man in a black business suit was taking public transportation at this hour. She wanted to ask him, but speaking with strangers was something she did for business, not pleasure. He caught her looking curiously towards him as the train began to pick up speed. Elena's first impulse was to look away, but he smiled before she could do so. A smile on the subway is rare, but she relaxed when he looked away. There was a dignified, reserved air about him. She didn't feel exposed. Elena took her lip balm out of her pocket and applied it to her lips. The night air had chapped them, and their pulsing reminded her of her beating heart. She looked out the window to stare into the whizzing blackness before peeking over at the man again, smiling shyly when she caught his eye. She looked down as they pulled into the next station. A thread was hanging off her skirt. "Damn it," she mumbled. She wove the thread around her fingers and pulled. The door squealed, and the thread snapped, and someone's footsteps announced themselves on the floor of the car. Elena looked up to see that a man had entered her car. He was staring straight at her, and he wasn't smiling. Elena jumped up and tried to make a run for the still open doors. The man lunged forward with arms outstretched, grabbed her, and threw her into the closest seat. Then he swung his own body onto the seat next to her and shoved her face against the glass. It was cold against her cheek. "Elena, Elena, Elena. How are you, darling? I haven't seen you around in quite some time."
Damn it, Sniper, what the hell are you doing here? Shouldn't you be off stealing so much TV or something?
Her voice squeezed out through her squished cheeks and sounded small against the window. Her breath fogged the glass, and if she had had a free hand, she would have written shit a couple times to make herself feel better. "I wouldn't be such a wise ass right now." Sniper pushed Elena's head harder against the glass, his palm open against the side of her face.
"I'm a big girl, Sniper. I can do whatever I want."
Elena felt like the bright lights shining down on her told a different story. However, she was 14 again, and a man's hand with palms the size of her skull were enclosed around her throat. The hairs on the back of her neck stood straight up. Sniper picked up on her fear like a bloodhound. "Where's my money, bitch?" he roared, shoving her face even harder into the glass. With the eruption of this last word, there was a movement from behind him. He turned his head, and over his shoulder, Elena could see the businessman standing with his arms at his sides. "I think you should step away from the lady," he said. His fear and apprehension was apparent in his wide eyes and the white knuckles of his balled fists. "Stay out of this," Sniper responded. He turned around, and over his shoulder, Elena could see that the man swayed with the motion of the train. But he didn't budge on his own account. "Who the hell is this guy?" Sniper snarled at Elena. "One of your regulars at the club? Why don't you grab yourself one of these poles and save him another trip there?"
"Fuck you!"
Elena spat in a surge of rage. Sniper pulled a gun from his jacket, and Elena choked back the stream of words that were about to pour from her open mouth. "I was always there for you, Elena. I was always your friend. When you needed a shoulder to lean on, I offered mine. when you needed a place to crash that night when your stalker showed up. I opened up my home to you.
Yeah, only because you thought you could get into my pants,
Elena retorted. I'm not done yet! Sniper's voice had risen to a shout. It continued to increase in volume as he went on. How about the time your ex-boyfriend punched you in the face and I lent you $500 to get your precious tooth fixed so you wouldn't lose your job? Remember that? Remember when you left 2 weeks later and I didn't see you again? Ring any fucking bells? Where's my money, bitch? The gun was glinting in the light as Sniper shouted in Elena's face. A hand landed on Sniper's shoulder. Leave her the hell up. In a sudden motion, Sniper twisted his body and flung out his arm. The sound of the shot was louder than anything Elena had ever heard. The importance of feeling professional, polished, and prepared when it counts. Right now. For small business owners or people who produce their own podcasts, being plugged in and prepared when an opportunity comes up is crucial. Those moments happen all the time. They're happening now. And having a business card that shows how professional you are in your pocket, ready to hand out, is the first step in making something happen. Your next big opportunity is coming right now, and all it takes to feel like you're ready to own the now is $10. That's a low price to have the confidence that you're always ready to make an impression or get seen in a new way. A custom card with the colors, fonts, designs, and images you choose means you can look and feel like a big deal, whether you're a startup or a business with a century of history. And it doesn't have to be hard. With Vistaprint, you can create a truly professional, unique card in minutes. First, upload your own design or start with one of our professionally designed options. Vistaprint offers simple tools and a wide range of templates to choose from. Then, pick the paper stock, style, and quantity that's right for you. And finally, choose your delivery speed, order and receive your cards in as few as 3 days. Vistaprint uses only carefully selected inks and responsibly sourced paper stocks. Dozens of designs that are just right for your business. Add your logo and contact information with just a few clicks, and know you can use it on all your marketing going forward. Your satisfaction is 100% guaranteed, or they'll make it right, either by reprinting your order or offering a refund. Vistaprint wants you to do something great for your business right now, which is why our listeners will get 500 high-quality custom business cards starting at $9.99. Use code SLEEP at Vistaprint.com. That's code SLEEP at Vistaprint.com. Sleep at Vistaprint.com. The man's words were cut off as he staggered backwards and fell into a seat across the aisle. Elena couldn't speak. Sniper was staring at the man in the suit with a look of fear and confusion. The garish lights streamed down, undeniable confirmation of the dark blood that was smoothing out the shadows under the seats. Elena's brain was foggy. Was the man still smiling? His eyes had been brown. She had seen them only a few minutes ago. What had he done to deserve to die? He had tried to help her. Smiles were rare on the subway. Possibly even rarer than murders. Sniper, what the fuck did you do? Elena began screaming. Sniper stared as the man's body slid flaccidly down from the seat to the floor. You're such a fucking idiot. What were you thinking? Shit. After a moment, Sniper seemed to spontaneously snap out of his trance. Shut up! Just shut up! He yelled while wildly pointing the gun. Elena did. She balled herself up against the wall and pressed her cheek up to the window. The glass was still cold, probably colder than the body that lay now on the floor. Sniper was pacing. We'll get off at the next stop. We'll leave the body here and make a run for it. No one will ever know it was us. Us? Elena was suddenly aware of the tears that were streaming down her face. Had she ever cried for a stranger before? There is no us. You did this. Sniper was instantly in Elena's face with his hand around her neck. There was a wild look in his eye, and she noticed that a fleck of his own spit had landed on his cheek. She'd seen that look before, with a different hand clutching her throat in a toxic embrace. This time, however, she stared back into the oblivion. Do it, Elena choked. Fucking do it! I dare you! She didn't even know the man's name. The breath was caught in her throat, but she was ready to exhale. Sniper's grip tightened, and the train began to slow down as it pulled into the next station. 2 people were standing, waiting for the train to stop. What were they doing, taking the subway this late at night? Didn't they know it was dangerous? Sniper let go of Elena's neck. He was looking out of the window. The gun was bold against the orange glow of the car. The train slowed to a stop. Elena watched in horror as the 2 middle-aged men walked towards the open doors, talking and laughing. Go to another car, she thought desperately. One of them glanced briefly at Elena through the window. His face lit up by the fluorescent lights as he neared the car, unaware. They reached the open doors of the death trap. Crossing over the threshold, still engaged in conversation. Sniper was standing. Elena saw it happening in slow motion. She wanted to speak. She wanted to warn them. With words booming over the loudspeaker, she couldn't get her voice past the swelling sting in her throat. She watched their eyes follow the trail of blood to where the dead man lay. What the? Elena squeezed her eyes shut against the noise and pressed trembling hands over her ears as hard as she could. It was quiet. Then she felt a rough hand on her shoulder. For a second, she dared to hope that maybe it was one of the men who had just come onto the train. However, when she opened her eyes and saw their punctured, bloody faces on the floor, she felt her stomach turn. Sniper took hold of her underneath her armpits to set her onto the floor, but her legs felt like jelly. Grunting, he let her fall to the floor and began dragging her towards the doors. He was talking. It was nonsense, most of it. But Elena's ringing ears caught bits and pieces. Say a fucking word and I'll kill you. Not dumb, and don't worry about the money. I'm pretty much a good guy, you know? I am. I never killed anyone in my life. It was self-defense, damn it. Elena's fishnet stockings were no barrier against the blood that now flooded the floor. Her legs became slippery and red, and she thought she could smell the death which now clung to her warm body. As she was towed through the gore, she wondered when smiles on the subway had become so treacherous. She wondered when it had happened that such a kind gesture had become an invitation for death. She didn't want to see the orange lights of the subway again, she thought. They were unforgiving. She wanted to see only the faceless silhouettes behind the single white light. They couldn't smile at her. Looking wearily up at Sniper, she could see that his face and neck were speckled with the blood of 1, 2, maybe even all 3 men. The murder weapon was tucked into his pants, and the muscles in his arms looked strained as he carted her along toward the exit. They were halfway to the doors when they began to shut. "Damn!" Sniper exclaimed, dropping Elena. She heard a clattering behind her, but her head was falling onto something hard and wet. A leg. She jumped and turned, scuttling backwards, staring wide-eyed at the body of the businessman sprawled out like he was making snow angels in the pool of blood surrounding him. "Elena, get up!" The mention of her name, Elena looked upwards into the light. Sniper was standing with one foot in the door, holding them open. The doors were dinging loudly, impatient, ready to close and get a move on. "Let's go!" Sniper yelled, agitated. Something glinted in the middle of the floor, and Elena looked down to see the sleek, black body of the gun on the floor between them. Sniper looked down and then back at her, his expression unreadable. Without thinking, Elena lunged for the gun. Sniper lunged for it too, his foot shooting out from in between the doors. They squealed shut, and the train lurched forward, sighing as it began to chug along, relieved to resume its duty. Elena's fingers enclosed the gun as Sniper's face came closer. He was stumbling, falling, and slipping in the blood that he had spilled. Her finger curled around the trigger. How do you shoot one of these things? Her finger twitched. A reflex. Sniper's body continued its trajectory, and he landed face first on the businessman's chest. Elena waited with bated breath, expecting him to retaliate. She remained motionless, kneeling with trembling arms outstretched in front of her, clutching the weapon with both hands and holding it so tight it was like a shiny reptilian extension of herself. For a moment, each body bounced up and down in unison to the motion of the train. Sniper's arm sprang up from off of the businessman's face and dragged down his chest in a passive embrace. If it wasn't for both of their open eyes, staring, unseeing, into different directions, they might have been confused with two close friends passed out drunk after a late night of partying. Of course, there was also the blood. Elena stared at the dark little rivulets that were already drying in the crevices of the floor. Her eyes traced the streaks up from her hands, bloodied from the holding the murder weapon, moved along her bespeckled sleeves and down the front of her frayed jean jacket, which looked as if it had been dipped into a vat of maroon paint. She took a shaking hand and picked a stiff section of hair up from off of her shoulder, the strands encrusted, her breath coming out in short gasps. The train was slowing down again. In the distance, Elena could hear the next destination being called over the loudspeaker. Through the blood-bespeckled window, Elena could see a man standing on the platform. He was safe now. She knew, but it was only she who knew. To any outside observer, she was a sniffling, blood-covered stranger with a frayed jean jacket and no name. Covered in the blood of 4 dead men, clutching a gun, finger still on the trigger like she knew what she was doing. Except Elena didn't know what she was doing. Last time, she had been just a girl watching her father take his final breath, clinging onto a knife as if it was her treasured teddy bear. That girl's hands were still her hands, trembling with self-doubt and triumph, shaking with fear and freedom. The train was coming to a stop, but her head couldn't stop spinning. The screeching of the wheels signaled her. She sprang to her feet, the gun heavy in her sticky fingers. The train came to a halt, and Elena turned to face the doors. The thin glass of the windows, the only thing separating her from the lone man, walking towards her car. The death car. Did he know yet? Could he see? All the years of pain, the anguish, the fear that she'd known in her short life? Or could he only see a murder scene with her as the prime suspect? She watched his face as he got closer. It changed from one of pensive calm to that of horrified shock as he saw the blood-bespeckled window and that which lay behind it. His eyes jerked sideways and he saw where she stood. The doors yanked themselves apart, offering a portal to a new world. And so Elena did what she learned to do that day, long ago, when she had ended the torture that had been dealt to her by a different cruel man. She ran. She ran past the stranger, his face just a shadow, his expression hidden. She ran with her long hair flying behind her, taking 2 steps at a time, running up and out of the station and out into the cover of the night. She would keep the gun. She didn't know when she would need it again. What helps you fall asleep? Noise machines? Essential oils? Maybe a podcast that claims to scare you to sleep but ended up being a little too scary to actually fall asleep, and oh my god, did your closet door just open a little? What if the reason you're not sleeping is that your mattress sucks because it wasn't designed for you? Helix Sleep built a sleep quiz that takes 2 minutes to complete, and they use the answers to match your body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress, which is a great new way to find a mattress because Have you ever been to a mattress store? The salesperson stares at you while you stiffly lay down, attempting to keep your shoes on that paper thingy they have on there to keep the displays clean. It's awful. Whether you're a side sleeper, hot sleeper, like a plush or firm bed, with Helix, there's no more guessing or confusion. Just go to helixsleep.com/sleep. Take their 2-minute sleep quiz, and they'll match you to a mattress that will give you the best sleep of your life. For couples, Helix can even split the mattress down the middle, providing individual support needs and feel preferences for each side. And this isn't like two twins smashed together. There are no peaks or valleys in the middle. It's a smooth transition, so feel free to cuddle up. They have a 10-year warranty, and you get to try it out for 100 nights risk-free. Right now, Helix is offering up to $125 off all mattresses. Get up to $125 off at helixsleep.com/sleep. That's helixsleep.com/sleep for $125 off your mattress order. helix.com/sleep. Last for the night, we have the strange story of our greatest president and all the paranormal activities he was a part of before and after his untimely death. From History.com, this is the ghost of President Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, from 1861 to 1865, is remembered for his vital role as the leader in preserving the Union during the Civil War and beginning the process that led to the end of slavery in the United States. He is also remembered for his character, his speeches and letters, and as a man of humble origins whose determination and perseverance led him to the nation's highest office. On April 9, 1865, Robert E. Lee surrendered his Confederate forces to Ulysses S. Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. Though the last rebel troops would not surrender until May, the Civil War was effectively over. The Union had held, but a weary President Abraham Lincoln would not live to see the triumphant march of the Army of the Potomac through the streets of Washington. Just 5 days later, on April 14, 1865, he was shot by a Southern sympathizer, John Wilkes Booth, in Ford's Theater. He died the next day. Psychics believe that President Lincoln has never left the White House, that his spirit remains to complete the business of his abbreviated second term and to be available in times of crisis. For 70 years, presidents, first ladies, guests, and members of the White House staff have claimed to have either seen Lincoln or felt his presence. The melancholy bearing of Lincoln himself and several instances of eerie prescience on his part only add to the legends of the great emancipator's ghost. The lanky president had paid fanatical attention to even the most minute details concerning the Civil War and felt personally responsible for its outcome. His background was Southern, leading some critics to accuse him of traitorous acts. Mary Todd Lincoln had brothers who fought for the Southern cause. By the time of his 1864 re-election, deep lines etched his face, and heavy black circles underlined his eyes. During his 5 years as Commander-in-Chief, he had slept little and taken no vacations. There may have been more to his sadness than even he would admit. Lincoln dreamed of his own death. Ward Hill Layman, a close friend of the president's, wrote down what Lincoln told him on an evening in early 1865. "About 10 days ago, I retired very late. the president told Layman. I soon began to dream. There seemed to be a death-like stillness about me. Then I heard subdued sobs, as if a number of people were weeping. I thought I left my bed and wandered downstairs. There, the silence was broken by the same pitiful sobbing, but the mourners were invisible. I went from room to room. No living person was in sight, but the same mournful sounds of distress met me as I passed alone. I was puzzled and alarmed, determined to find the cause of a state of things so mysterious and shocking. I kept on until I arrived at the East Room. Before me was a catafalque, on which rested a corpse, wrapped in funeral vestments. Around it were stationed soldiers who were acting as guards, and there was a throng of people, some gazing mournfully upon the corpse, whose face was covered, others weeping pitifully. "Who is dead in the White House?" I demanded of one of the soldiers. "The president," was his answer. "He was killed by an assassin." It was not the first time Lincoln saw his own death. Soon after his election in 1860, he'd seen a double image of his face reflected in a mirror in his Springfield, Illinois home. One was his real face, the other a pale imitation. Lincoln's superstitious wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, did not see the mirror images, but was deeply troubled by her husband's account of the incident. She prophesied that the sharper image indicated that he would serve out his first term. The faint, ghost-like image was a sign, she said, that he would be renominated for a second term, but would not live to complete it. President Lincoln's morose acceptance of his own mortality was never more apparent than on the morning of his tragic visit to Ford's Theater. He summoned the cabinet to the council chamber. The president's face was grave. "Gentlemen," he began, "before long, you will have important news." The cabinet members pressed him to reveal what information he had, but Lincoln demurred. I have no news, but you will hear tomorrow." He hesitated, his chin cupped in his bony hands. "I have had a dream, the same dream that I have had 3 times before. I am in a boat, alone on an ocean. I have no oars, no rudder. I am helpless, adrift." The president seemed to be speaking out of reverie. He scanned the questioning faces before him, then stood up and shambled out of the room. It was possibly the strangest cabinet meeting ever called by a president of the United States. That night, President Lincoln was shot in the back of the head with a single bullet fired from a Derringer as he watched Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater. He died at 7:22 the next morning, April 15th, 1865. A train bore Lincoln's body home to Springfield. That solemn procession has given rise to another president legend surrounding Lincoln. Each year, on the anniversary of that journey, so the story goes, 2 ghost trains slowly travel the rails between Washington and Illinois. Aboard the first train, a military band plays a funeral dirge. Before the smoke of the locomotive clears, a second steam engine follows silently behind, pulling a coach bearing a coffin containing the body of President Lincoln. The ghost trains never reach Springfield. The shock felt by the nation upon the death of its 16th president took years to wear off. Children, too young to have understood the implications of the tumultuous years of the Civil War, saw their parents' bereavement and wanted to learn more about the man from Illinois. Newspapers responded to this need by reprinting numerous stories about Abraham Lincoln's early years. Most were true. Others contained more fable than fact. It is true that tragedy had stalked Lincoln long before his presidential term. His beloved mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, died when her son was 9. When Lincoln's first love, Anne Rutledge, died of typhoid fever, he lapsed into a melancholy that may have led to his emotional breakdown a few years later. In 1842, at the age of 33, Lincoln married Mary Todd, but the union was not a particularly happy one. Mary had a mercurial temperament and a strong belief in the supernatural. It was her influence that led to her husband's interest in spiritualism, though he always regarded it with some skepticism. The Lincolns had 3 sons, but only Robert Todd lived to adulthood. Edward died at age 4, and young Willie succumbed to a fever during his father's first term as president. Lincoln was shattered by Willie's death and often visited the crypt where the child was buried. He would sit for hours, weeping copiously. At Mrs. Lincoln's urging, seances were held at the White House with the hope of communicating with their dead sons. The results of these seances were not entirely satisfying, and it's believed that Lincoln attended only 2 of them. During the administration of Ulysses S. Grant, however, a member of the household staff claimed to have seen Willie and to have conversed with his spirit. In the Lyndon B. Johnson presidency from 1963 to 1969, Lyndon Johnson Robb occupied the room where Willie had died, and later where the autopsy on Abraham Lincoln had been performed. This was also the room in which President Truman's mother died. Mrs. Robb wrote to the authors of this book that, although she had never seen a ghost in the White House, I did live in a room where lots of sad things took place. Liz Carpenter, press secretary to Lady Bird Johnson, told author John Alexander that Mrs. Johnson believed that she felt Lincoln's presence one spring evening while watching a television program about his death. She noticed a plaque she'd never seen before hanging over the fireplace. It mentioned Lincoln's importance in that room in some way. Mrs. Johnson admitted feeling a strange coldness and a decided sense of unease. This disquieting apprehension has been felt by others. Grace Coolidge, wife of Calvin Coolidge, the 30th president, was the first person to report having actually seen the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. She said he stood at a window of the Oval Office, hands clasped behind his back, gazing out over the Potomac, perhaps still seeing the bloody battlefields beyond. The ghost of Lincoln was seen frequently during the administration of Franklin D. Roosevelt, when the country went through a devastating depression, then a world war. When Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands was a guest at the White House during that period, she was awakened one night by a knock on her bedroom door. Thinking it might be an important message, she got up and opened the door. The top-hatted figure of President Lincoln stood in the hallway. The Queen fainted. When she came to, she was lying on the floor. The apparition had vanished. Eleanor Roosevelt used Lincoln's bedroom as her study. Although she denied seeing the former president's ghost, she admitted to feeling his presence whenever she worked late at night. She thought he was standing behind her, peering over her shoulder. On one occasion, Mrs. Roosevelt's secretary, Mary Eben, encountered Lincoln's ghost sitting on the bed in the northwest bedroom. He was pulling on his boots, as if in a hurry to go somewhere. The startled young woman screamed and ran from the second floor. Other staffers of that era said that they'd seen Lincoln lying quietly on his bed in the afternoon. Seamstress Lily Rogers Parks detailed in her autobiography a mystifying experience that she had one summer day in that same northwest room. It had just been freshly painted, and she was putting it back in order. The White House was almost empty because the Roosevelts had gone to Hyde Park, taking most of the maids with them. As Mrs. Parks worked, she kept hearing someone coming to the door, but she never saw anyone. In fact, the second floor was deserted. After an hour of listening to the tromping, Mrs. Parks went searching for the source. On the third floor, she found a houseman. She asked him why he kept pacing the second floor. He shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "I haven't been on that floor. I just came on duty. That was Abe you heard." During Harry S. Truman's administration, his daughter Margaret slept in that area of the White House and often heard rappings on her bedroom door late at night. Whenever she checked, no one was there. She complained to her father, and he said the noises must be due to dangerous settling of the floors. He ordered the White House completely rebuilt. It was a propitious decision. The chief architect, Major General E. Edgerton, told President Truman that the building had been in danger of imminent collapse. Had the ghost of Lincoln tried to warn the Trumans that the president's home was ready to fall down? 30 years after the rebuilding of the White House, the Lincoln bedroom was still regarded as a spooky place. Susan Ford, daughter of President Gerald Ford, said publicly that she believes in ghosts, and during her stay in the White House, she had no intention of ever sleeping in that room. Stories of a ghostly President Lincoln wandering the corridors and rooms of the White House persist, but are not officially acknowledged. The gangly prairie lawyer, with the black stovepipe hat and the long, sad face, was the kind of man around whom legends naturally collect. If one were to believe in ghosts, one would have to believe that the benevolent spirit of Abraham Lincoln, our greatest president, still watches over the nation he fought so gallantly to preserve. Thanks for listening. Next week, to kick off the Halloween season, we'll be having another episode of Your True Paranormal Stories. So please get your stories into me by Wednesday, October 3rd at the latest for your story to be considered. I already have a few on the docket that are going to make you think twice about turning out the lights at bedtime. Remember to email them to me at scareyoutosleep@gmail.com. This week's Patreon supporters and those who have my eternal gratitude are Alvaro Martinez, Jason Ballard, and Laura. Thank you all so much. Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at scareyoutosleep. Follow me on both at Shelby B. Scott. Join our Facebook group. There's been a little confusion. There's a page and a group. I believe the page pops up first when you search, so if you like the page, then there is a link and a button to take you to the group where you can request to be let in. Please answer the questions. They're really simple. They just let me and my mods, Maddie and Rosemary, know that you aren't a robot or trying to sell us bitcoins. Now, go get some sleep. Sweet dreams.